Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We'll give it a couple of minutes for folks to dial in. I know many of you are dialing in from all over the world, all different times. And while we're getting started, if you don't mind dropping in the chat where you're dialing in from and what you're excited to learn about today. It's exciting to see just the global distribution that we're able to have because we're putting the events together live. So I myself, I'm dialing in from Oakland, California. I'm really excited to hear a little bit more how we take these holistic approaches to creating a resilient clean energy startup ecosystem. We'll talk about it a bit, but Accelerate Energy series has touched on all different facets of the ecosystem, from policy to markets, and how to bring that all together in a really comprehensive way is certainly an art. So I'm excited to hear more from Dianto, Nalin, and Rubium as well from Singevity to understand how we really take ourselves into the next clean energy revolution. We have Goa, Oakland, Sydney. Hi, Brenda. Awesome. Dianto and Nalin, what are you both most excited to learn about today or share?
Hi, yes, Neha. I think I'm excited to learn about what we can learn in Indonesia from, for example, knowledge program in India and also from others, in this room. Yeah.
No, I think likewise. I think there's so much sharing that something like a forum like this enables. So I'm looking forward to hearing what Dianto and Robin have to say. And of course from the audience once we open that up.
Yeah, definitely. And those in the audience, we do have the Q&A enabled for this session. So if questions come up as everyone is talking, feel free to drop your thoughts into the chat or the Q&A, and we will have some time for that afterwards as well. So no need to hold on to your thought, just drop it in there and we'll get to it. Cool. All right. Well, let's get started here. We have a lot to cover. So for those of you who may not be familiar, who we are, what we're doing here, just wanted to share a little bit about New Energy Nexus. So New Energy Nexus is an international organization that supports clean energy entrepreneurs with funds, accelerators, and networks. Originally started in California, and now there are programs in China, India, Southeast Asia, and East Africa. And in the time of being New Energy Nexus, there has been a leverage of $1.5 billion in investment. We've invested and supported in over 1,000 clean energy entrepreneurs and launched industry-leading startup support programs and funds all over the world. So that's a little bit about New Energy Nexus, and we'll drop some links in the chat as well so that you can find out more about what we do and see how you might want to get involved, whether it be a mentor or an entrepreneur or a funder. There are many ways, and we need all different types of voices to be a part of this. So we look forward to hearing from you. And we are in conversation in Accelerate Energy series. So we decided to really take a moment to think about what it means to be a part of the clean energy ecosystem, especially in 2020. I think we are all witnessing so much in our own backyards all over the world. And we knew that it would be really important to start to have deep dialogue about the different parts of the clean energy ecosystem. And over the past few weeks, we've been exploring the inquiry: how do we accelerate the global clean energy startup ecosystem to be diverse, inclusive, and economically empowering. And that's allowed us to have some really rich conversations from folks all over the world, talking a little bit about what it means to be in climate fintech and what it means to take an equity lens to a lot of these entrepreneur support programs. So we'll drop more links in the chat about that as well, so that you can catch up on all the conversations that have been had to date. But first, I want to take you on a bit of a tour of what we've talked about, what we've learned, and show you a little bit about what we've covered. So I'll go ahead and share my screen and give a quick glance to the Q&A. Awesome. We've got Vietnam as well. All right, here we go. So in an effort to really try to speak many different languages when it comes to putting together a lot of this content, we also decided to create an artifact of a Miro board. So we have this inquiry here. Again, how do we accelerate the global clean energy startup ecosystem to be diverse, inclusive, and economically empowering? And first, we had a kickoff session reflecting on the clean energy ecosystem in 2030, where we were joined by Vic Shao of Amply Power and Deputy Speaker Lauren Lagarda from the Philippines. And we were able to have a moment to understand, what does it mean to be in the Philippines and working on energy access? What does it mean to be Vic Shao, and really focusing on that economic lens as well? So if you want to catch up on that session, feel free to hop onto that YouTube link. And then our next session, we decided to think about, what would this world look like in 2030? If we imagine our dream clean energy startup ecosystem in 2030, what does it look like? What does it feel like? And we dropped into many different aspects of the ecosystem. We talked about policy, and we realized that the entrepreneurial state has to be really prolific and prominent in policy. We also want to speed up policy making and support that with different technologies. We want to see cross-border and supercluster development. And I think we're seeing hints of that now. But to get to 2030 and really create that world is going to take a lot of effort and strategizing across borders, across sectors. And I really am excited for that world when it does happen. We also talked about the world of finance in 2030 and what climate fintech means in 2030, where we can see blended finance a little bit more frequently. We can see different types of digital currencies becoming more mainstream. We can also see other benchmarks for financing and lending that are well established and allow more liquidity in the markets. We see lots of abundant early stage capital. And I think we also know that policy and finance can also be very interrelated. And at the same time, those things will allow for very robust innovation. We talked about what it means in the culture of 2030, where clean energy is mainstream, and we have planet education for all. We have a thriving clean energy startup ecosystem, and the notion of energy isn't daunting anymore either. We're really able to tackle those complex concepts and those complex grids. We're also seeing more scaling and grants. We see philanthropy understanding the value of startups in this role, the role of startups and social impact. We see much more tech-enabled communities and different methods and mediums of learning and sharing. We also see mass mentoring available everywhere. We see many engineers, we see entrepreneurs that are indigenous to the place that they are in, and we see tech-enabled serendipity. And all these different ways of being really coming together in a coordinated effort. We also see global accessible markets. It's easier to work across borders, and we see greater collaboration between lots of the actors and players that are in this world. And we see markets that are competitive and make sense, and at the same time are cooperative because they're complementing each other in the way of bringing the clean energy revolution to the world. So as we imagine what that could be in 2030, we also mapped what changes would be required in order for that to happen. What barriers and enablers might we encounter along the way? And that helped us really understand the landscape that we're working within and what it could be like to imagine that more beautiful future. I think many of us are seeing headlines left and right and seeing floods and fires more frequently than ever before. And so it's even more important to dream into what it could be in 2030 and make a plan to get there. So after we imagined the clean energy ecosystem of 2030, we then had events that touched on all of these aspects as well. We talked about the role of policy and innovation around the world, and we had Nora Brown dialing in from Vietnam, Katrina joining in from the CEC, Mona Lisa joining us as well from the Philippines. And if you'd like to learn more about what they talked about, feel free to watch that video there. And we have a couple of snapshots for you as well. If you want to see what the energy industry built on renewables looks like in the Philippines, what is that timeline? How did we get to here? If you want to understand what investment challenges might exist, you can also see that information there. It's way too much for me to even try to get into right now, but there's lots of content, lots of exciting stuff to be discussed, to marinate in your mind and to work towards in the future. We also talked about climate fintech and launched our inaugural climate fintech report, where you can see tons of information and pages upon pages of what it means to be in the world of climate finance. And so we mapped the emerging ecosystem of climate capital catalysts. And if you'd like to read more about that report, you can go ahead and click on this link here. And again, we'll drop the link to this in the chat so that you can easily access it. There's lots of great information in there. If you're just trying to better understand the world of climate fintech, this is a great place to start. We also talked about what it means to incorporate an equity lens into entrepreneur support programs. So we had a very lively discussion about what it means to be able to do that. What does it mean to have diversity and inclusivity? How does it show up in different regions, in different sectors, and different areas? There were incredible resources shared in that conversation. So if you'd like to learn more, definitely that is one that is not to be missed. We also had a showcase of global e-mobility startups all around. And I don't even know where to begin with all of that, but the ideas and the innovation and the creativity that is coming out of the world right now is just unfathomable and very, very exciting. I think it's an incredible time to be working on clean energy, to be dreaming into clean energy, and the opportunities are just abound. So definitely check that out, especially if you're wanting to feel inspired and see what possibility might be out there. I promise my monologue will be done soon. But we also had a conversation around best practices for collaboration between corporates and startups, because we all know that if we're going to create this, we need all types of stakeholders to play together really nicely. And we also know that it might be difficult or it might feel risky. So we were joined by Brian Hassin, Andy Santos, and Kevin Self from the backgrounds of Third Derivative, Schneider Electric, and PLDT to share a little bit more about their lessons learned from the perspective of corporates and also entrepreneurs, and the partnerships that can happen between all of those. We learned a little bit about mistakes not to make and things to definitely do. So if you are dialing in and you're exploring what it might mean to partner with a corporate and how to position yourself in a really attractive way, that's a great place to start. There are many ideas and many resources that are shared. And we also talked about startups catalyzing energy access in emerging markets. So there's lots of information in this one as well. And if you go into here, you can actually view the entire presentation and catch up on all that content here. So there were many startups that were showcased from all different regions, and you can learn a little bit more about New Energy Nexus as well when you go through this. So that takes me to today. And today we want to learn a little bit more about what it means to bring all of this thought, all of this content together, and to share this information in a way that inspires and that creates more innovation and opportunity, and in a way to do that in an accelerated way. So we are joined today by Dianto from Indonesia and Nalin from India, and they're going to share a little bit more about what it means to be an accelerator in doing all of this work, what challenges one might face, and what potential solutions might exist. So with that, I'll turn it over to Nalin, and he'll share a little bit more about the programs happening in India and their areas of focus. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Neha, and very inspiring this past 1.5 months, all the work and all the minds that have come together. So thank you for that recap. It's great. Right, just gonna start to share my screen. Yeah. Good, you can see it. Right. So great. So I'm gonna take a few minutes to talk about a program that we ran in India this year called Electron Vibe. In fact, we are literally a day away from finishing this program. Tomorrow the jury convenes, and we're essentially going to wrap after that. So a quick overview of this program. This was essentially a program where we wanted to get innovators and startups together with electric utilities. Now in India and much of Asia, electric utilities are relatively political entities. They operate in their own political economies. There's a lot of state ownership involved. There's a level of liberalization that we're coming to, but that is still some time away. So there are certain challenges that that we know exist, and energy access, which is a key driver of a lot of programs in India. The problem of energy access has arisen because a lot of utilities are not very efficient in what they're supposed to do. So with that, I am going to try and shift the slide. Great. So this is the broad problem that we were trying to address, is that utilities, electric utilities in India, they're cash strapped. They're not financially solvent a lot of the times. And at the same time, this entire problem is being compounded by many of the high value customers, commercial and industrial segment customers, moving to other sources of energy, which are becoming increasingly cost competitive with grid supply, right? So we essentially set out to identify startups and innovators to come up with what we call a business case approach, which is essentially them pitching the ideas as if they were part of utilities themselves, right? And the ultimate goal, the ultimate aim was to help utilities strengthen their or shore up their financial positions. And keep in mind, all of this is happening in a constrained environment of utilities being state-owned entities and not very amenable to innovation, right? So with that in mind, we designed a 10-week program along with a 3-decade-old think tank called the Regulatory Assistance Project, which works with utilities all over the world, right? So over the 10 weeks, we had 8 weeks of training where we went through various sessions on understanding the power sector. and specifically focusing on how startups can innovate for and with utilities and how they could work with utilities. Keep in mind again that because of the state ownership of utilities, many of them can't easily work with the private sector without going through a large large tendering process. Uh, and even more so, the challenge of working with startups is amplified in such an environment. You know, we were supported by a strong partner network, global and Indian think tanks, including, as I mentioned, RAP, SED Fund, who were the sponsors of this program, and of course, some of the larger global think tanks like RMI and WRI, IEFA. All of them brought in their expertise as well and their experts. Um, the last 4 weeks, we went through a business case development process where we paired each of the startups. So we selected 11 startups in what is called the solutions track, which is the serious track. And then we had 9 other innovators in what we call the blue sky thinking track, which is unconstrained imaginative thinking. So for those 11 startups, we identified mentors who worked with them over 4 weeks to create a business case. And this was from the point of view of ensuring that this would be palatable for discoms, right? So a few things to navigate there. The outcomes. So as I mentioned, there were 11 startups. One small requirement we had was they had to be India based, although we got global startups. The idea was this could potentially lead to a pilot, so India presence was important. This is the first such platform connecting discoms and innovators in India. And we believe we've come to a model that's replicable and scalable across South Asia as well as Southeast Asia, and where we can work with discoms and try to bring innovators globally to solve their problems. A quick foray into the challenges we identified specifically, apart from the broader problem statement. One, as I mentioned, there's almost a distorted incentive here. There's so Indian discoms and many discoms in Asia have the same problem. They are regulated entities, and they almost get they have a guaranteed rate of return on equity, and by law they have to pass on a lot of any operational gains to the consumer. Those are welfare concerns. Now, this reduces any incentive to innovate, particularly outside of certain trust areas, and I'll come to that in a bit. Secondly, a limited capacity to work with startups and innovators. This is a problem of many large organizations, and especially when you're state-owned, this is amplified, this problem. And finally, lack of ownership of ideas, because it's related to both the above 2 points, 1 and 2. And we set out to kind of solve this year, and I'll go through how we tried to solve for it. So we wanted to create a showcase platform to show what is possible, right, in terms of the kinds of solutions that are prevalent and being developed globally, so that discoms get more interested in the idea of introducing more and more innovation at a deeper level. Secondly, a key goal this year was to identify internal champions within the utilities, and we were happy to find 4 or 5 really strong champions who are looking at innovation as a way to solve problems and looking at a way to effect change. So we want to increase that number, of course, over the years, but it kind of validated an initial hypothesis. And the last challenge, we kind of wanted the utilities themselves to tell us the problem statements. And the problem statement we identified came about as a result of several years of working with discoms. RAP worked with discoms, our teams have worked with utilities to come up with the problem statement that we did. Now, this is something as a first pilot in India that we wanted to solve. And going forward, there's much more that we want to do, right? We want to create a deeper global showcase of what's possible, ongoing research, ongoing case studies of what's happening, and find ways to show to the utilities in India, in the rest of Southeast Asia, that these are solutions that are applicable in your case. Related to that, we want to set up test beds for demonstration projects and pilot projects. And of course, if the aspiration is to also set up a pilot fund where we can co-invest with discoms, to show what's possible and to prove what's possible, and then let discoms or the utilities deploy larger funds for large scale deployment. Uh, Secondly, we want to increase, as I mentioned, the number of internal champions that look to innovation as a solution. And we want to also institute capacity building workshops, ongoing workshops, ongoing collaborations to be able to have the capacity internally to work with startups and innovators, right? And finally, in addition to having more and more problem statements coming from the utilities themselves, we want to also eventually create a working group of progressive utilities across Asia, uh, where the sharing of ideas and knowledge is far more streamlined, and eventually move to a center of excellence as well. And finally, uh, identify high leverage interventions. Now, there may be a disincentive to innovate at a general scale, but there's always some thrust areas where utilities want to focus. In India, for example, we know and we found out more and more that reduction of what is euphemistically called technical and commercial losses, which essentially refers to theft of power or under recoveries of billing. Those are trust areas where they want to improve their operational efficiency. If you go to them and tell them, okay, we want to make your grid smart, great idea, but it's not a trust area. But something like this is. So we want to find those high leverage interventions and work to identify startups in those areas. So with that, I'm gonna close this little talk and pass it on back to Neha or Dianto.
Sure. Thanks so much, Nalin. And we'll have some time for Q&A afterwards as well. I know I have some questions about how to get a deeper global showcase and how you plan to do a little bit more pilot funding, et cetera, et cetera. So let's hear a little bit from Dianto, and then we can explore more about Indonesia and then bring it all together afterwards. Dianto, please take it away.
Oh, thank you, Neha. So I'm going to share a little bit about our experience in Indonesia in developing our program, our Smart Energy program, which is our incubation and acceleration program for uh, renewable energy startups in Indonesia. So, but first of all, I would like to share with you some of the challenges and from the ecosystem level that we are currently facing in Indonesia. So just a little bit of background. We started our activities in Indonesia in 2019, and back then and still now, we realized that when we talk about renewable energy startups in Indonesia, or people basically stakeholders, they don't really know, or they don't really have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about what constitutes renewable energy startups. And when we talk about renewable energy, most of the time, if not all of the time, they just assume that it's all about infrastructure projects, about multi-million-dollar projects, and not at all includes about the role of startups, and or how could startups can play significant roles in renewable energy sectors, or even in the transition to renewable energy in Indonesia. So we realized back then that it's not a well-developed ecosystem in Indonesia, and we need to find a way, so to speak, to get people to understand, raise their awareness, raise their understanding that if they want to do something in renewable energy, they have options. They have the possibility to also uh, join in the movement, so to speak. So because it's not just limited to, again, infrastructure, big infrastructure projects, and because of the limited knowledge and information about renewable energy startups in Indonesia, we found out that there's not, in terms of numbers, there's not much to talk about in terms of renewable energy startups in Indonesia. It's quite difficult for us in the beginning. Well, it still is difficult to actually find and identify innovative startups, with the potential for scalable growth, also for impacts. So, and obviously, when there's no ecosystem to support those startups, then they have a bit of difficulty when existing startups, if any, they need funding, additional funding uh, to allow them to grow. So because of all these challenges, we develop some support services that hopefully can alleviate some of those problems. Of course, we're not working on this alone, but we always try to work with other parties, with other stakeholders, um, uh, because it's actually, well, obviously it's a big task in itself. So in Indonesia, we have several activities. So we have what we call Connects Energy Meetup. So this is our platform to educate, excite, and energize, if you will, local stakeholders, provide them with information about what could they possibly do when they have some ideas, when they have some innovations, but they don't really know where to turn to in terms of support. So we have that every month, and we usually work with local stakeholders, with local startup communities, with local governments, universities, to bring all these stakeholders together. And we also have a monthly recharge bootcamp. This is our way of trying to provide potential founders with some knowledge on how to develop their startups, how to develop their business model, um, uh, and getting them to understand the nuts and bolts of developing a renewable energy startup. And we also have what we call smart energy program. This is our incubation and acceleration program for renewable energy startups. Um, uh, uh, Up until now, we have been able to get 40 startups into our programs. And we hope that we will be able to uh, double or probably triple that numbers in the next 12 or 16 months. Again, with the hope that what we've been able to do up until now in educating the stakeholders, providing them with information and support, capacity building support, as well as funding support, I will be able to encourage more founders to be able to have the confidence to build renewable energy startups, so that hopefully in the next 12 months, we will have more robust ecosystem in terms of the varieties of innovations, the varieties of business models for renewable energy startups in Indonesia. Uh, uh, in the last 12 to 14 months, we've been able to develop a program for incubation and acceleration for our startups. And I think some of the lessons learned that we've been able to take from this program is that for us, at least in Indonesia, we're taking into account the dynamics of local startups in Indonesia. It's good for us to be able to have a clear focus, timelines, and also milestones into the program, so that startups know from the beginning that in the next 2 or 3 or 4 months that these are the things that we can help them with, and these are the issues that we can help them to solve. And we also find out that it's it's a I think it's a good thing if we can provide them with the activities or curriculum that's appropriate for Indonesian startups. We do have a basis for that, fortunately, and we were able to develop an appropriate curriculum and activities for our startup. We're still trying out some new things, and I think for the next 12 months, so we will continue to tweak our ideas in terms of curriculum and activities, and also what we find important is being able to collect a baseline or surface to measure progress of these startups, because without that, I guess it's quite obvious that it's very hard to measure the progress of the program as well as the startups themselves. And we found out earlier that we need to work with the whole team, not just the founders, because otherwise it's very hard to get any traction for the startups. And of course, every once in a while, we have one or two teams where the founders are just basically a one-man show. And I guess what we can learn from that is, in this kind of setting, it's hard for the startup themselves to get meaningful traction. So yeah, and regular check-in and evaluation help a lot in our programs. And we also have a dedicated program manager that acts as a partner for this startup. So these are the things that we learned in the last 12 or 14 months, and we try to continue to modify, to innovate, and try out new things in order for us to be able to better serve our startups moving forward. So yeah, that's the sharing from Indonesia. Back to you, Neha. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dianto. I feel like there's so much that we could potentially dive into, but I think maybe we'll start this from the journey of the idea. So when you both are talking to entrepreneurs and when you're coming up with these programs, what are the reasons and how are you finding entrepreneurs to come to the program itself? There's different levels of I suppose robustness of clean energy ecosystems in different areas. So what's the why that's driving a lot of people to these programs?
John, did you want to go first? Oh,
sure. I think for Indonesia, Neha, what we've seen is that basically the founders or potential founders, they want to join in the movement, so to speak. They understand that the future is renewable. They've seen what the use of fossil fuels can do in terms of damage to the environment and the economy, and so on and so forth, to the environment and the economy of Indonesia and their local communities. But until then, at least until we started our operations, they didn't really know what to do, because again, they thought it was all about building big infrastructures, independent power projects, and things like that. So potential founders with the knowledge in IoT or in background in software, for example, they thought that, well, there is nothing I can do. I want to join into the movement. I want to be part of the movement, but there's nothing I can do. So until they realize that they can do IoT based renewable energy startups, and that they can do business model startups, and that's what we try to deliver through our Connects Energy meetup. We try to educate them, we try to energize them, we try to provide them with knowledge and information that there are things that they can do, if that's what they want. So, and that's what we've been trying to do in the last 12 to 14 months.
great. I'll just chip in for India. What we've seen, I think, two broader trends, as it were. One is, of course, India's had a relatively vibrant startup ecosystem for the last several years now. Um, it was still an emerging ecosystem as far as the clean energy and the clean tech sector was concerned. Now, it's always almost a chicken and egg situation after a while, where the best entrepreneurs need to they're naturally attracted to sectors where they feel that there's funding, there's follow-on funding, there's large opportunity. So I think what we're seeing is there's now recognition that yes, clean energy and clean tech is something that there's investor interest and support for, right? There's an ecosystem that's being built. There are mentors that are increasingly there, because this is a very domain specialized sector. We need people who understand the nuances of working in the power sector and working in energy, because a lot of these, at least in India and much of Asia, are regulated as well, regulated sectors. So we need people who understand those things. Now, the second thing, of course, that's complemented by this is generally a enabling policy framework, and this is at the larger energy and power sector. So we're now leaders. When I say leaders, the top five in the world, at least in both wind and solar. Um, and there's increasing thrust. There's a moratorium for the next 7 years. Well, 3 years ago it started, so there was a 10-year moratorium on new coal. Let's see if that lasts, but we're hopeful it lasts. But in general, there's to echo even Dianto's point, there's increasing recognition amongst the younger generation that this is not the way to go. In India, we have a lot of polluted cities also. The top 20 of the most polluted is is dominated by Indian cities. So the younger generation can see what's happening, and now because there's a business case to be made for cleaner sources of energy, there's massive opportunities. Yeah. So I think there's a few trends here that are, and the confluence of factors that are leading to tipping points, as it were. And we're seeing that in the last year as well. There's, in fact, the angel networks that we speak to, the last year, majority of the investments went into clean energy, and that's never happened before. So we see that across.
Wow. That's fascinating. And it sounds like it's a combination of both recognizing that the situation that we're in is dire. And while it's dire, it's also full of opportunity. And it's one thing to recognize that, and it's another to understand what our role is in that world. So, what are the ways that we can apply our skills? And how do we show many different audiences that they can be empowered? Deonto, to your point where people were saying, oh, but I don't know what to do. I think there's a really big role that the accelerator plays to highlight what these opportunities are, to show that there are many different ways to be a part of this. And so it's very exciting to hear some of those statistics and to recognize that this is a position that we're in, and to know that these programs exist. It feels exactly what needs to happen, and I'm happy that this work is happening. So now that we've thought about the journey of, okay, we've got the entrepreneur and the idea, and they're in the program and they're thinking about their business case. Where are the points where you're seeing maybe a surprising amount of either friction or hurdles, or is there a certain point where if you make it past this threshold, you've really, really, really done it? There's got to be some bit of learning curve. Do you know when that happens, or when might that happen for some of your programs?
Dianto, please.
Yeah. I guess I'm the first. Okay. From what we have seen in Indonesia in the last 12 months, we see that when founders or startups they pass uh, they passed the prototype stage, and they've been able to identify their first paying customers, and uh, the that's when their journey begins in terms of building sustainable uh, commercial entities, and as well as making sure that their ideas will be able to deliver impacts, both commercial, commercial and financial. So for us in Indonesia, it's about moving past the prototype stage. We've seen a number of startups who have not been able to pass those stages, and unfortunately, they hit the wall, they hit the roadblocks, and they need to rethink their ideas and approaches to solve the problems. Um, uh, and because of that, for us in Indonesia, we in the last 3 or 4 months, we decided to provide our startups with what we call mentor in residence programs. This is a structured mentoring programs that provide startups with partners in certain areas. We have free mentor in residence programs, finance, human resource, and marketing and communications. And we've seen that from those from startups who are in this program, they're able to move faster through the stages, the discovery and the business model and so on and so forth. So yeah, I guess that's what we've been able to observe from Indonesia.
I mean, I'll just keep it a little short. A lot of what Dianto said has covered what we've also seen. One part where we like to focus on and we're increasingly finding there's value in focus on is the customer validation phase. Because a lot of these companies are led by technologists, and they're very good at product development sometimes, but really to understand the customer's needs and to be able to validate that their hypothesis is the right way to solve the problem. That's something we try to focus on, and we're finding the startups that actually go through a validation process and a deep validation process are able to kind of get to commercial success quicker, and be able to sustain what is eventually a difficult journey for any startup, especially operating in uncertain markets. So yeah, I think there's something that we're seeing.
Very, very interesting. All right, we've got two more questions for both of you. So now that we've gotten to the business case and understanding what it means to get to that point, when one is ready for partnerships across different corporates and utilities, and playing nicely with many different stakeholders, what are the biggest insights that you can share? You both have incredible partnerships with your programs, and you're seeing lots of entrepreneurs come through as well. So what's your 2 cents on what it means to have a really collaborative partnership across these stakeholders?
I think for startups in Indonesia, at least, it's when they're able to identify what they can contribute to the idea, then it's going to be more fruitful. They need to be the driver of the relationship with their corporate partners, not the other way around. Because otherwise, then they're not able to realize their full potential. And there is always power game between startups and big corporates. They have more resources and so on and so forth. But for the startups, if they know that this is the area that we do, and this is the area that we do well, then obviously that can increase their bargaining power. And that by being smart about it, by being smart in deploying those knowledge and expertise, I think they would be in a much better position in striking the deals with the potential corporate partners.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is increasing interest within corporate organizations, and recognition of innovation being necessary for growth, and especially a changing environment, a rapidly changing environment. There's perhaps some level of, again, capacity building that's required, and that's something that as ecosystem builders, we have a role to play there, and be able to be that bridge that allows large organizations and more strappy organizations to work together. So I think that's something that we want to focus on, I guess.
Great. All right, so I'm going to share the question that I've been asking everyone. As we dream into 2030, tell me more about what you imagine. What do your accelerators and what does the clean energy ecosystem look like in your dream 2030?
I think in 2030, I would dream about, having at least one startup every day coming to our door asking, oh, what can you do for us? Rather than right now, it's like one every 2 or 3 months, or probably more. Um, I would, I think I would like to have a robust ecosystem where corporates, governments, universities, and community startups, that they can actually work together um, to accelerate the transition towards the renewable energy. And we don't just talk about providing access to energy, but we talk about e-mobility, we talk about energy efficiency, and talk about storage, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it will be good if we can have that, not by 2030, but probably in the next 5 years.
So in the next 10 years, well, I hope we've managed to support 10,000 startups in India. And I mean 10,000 startups in clean energy, and we're probably hitting our goals then if we're able to do that, yeah, I think that's a North Star perhaps to look at.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your insights. And for those of you dialing in, we'll share the links again, but you can learn more from Nalin, Dianto, many of our other programs, and many of the other conversations that we've had about having a diverse, inclusive, and economically empowering clean energy startup ecosystem. And a big theme of what we've been talking about today is how to bring in different parts of that ecosystem, how to speak different languages, and how to attract different types of audiences and entrepreneurs, because we know it is going to take everyone. And so if we want to have 100% clean energy for 100% of the population, we really have to know what lever to pull, what language to speak, what metrics to say, what emotion to really share. And I'm delighted and honored to introduce our next speaker, Rubiam Anders, who's going to share a little bit more about this. So just for some background, Rubiam has been a sustainable entrepreneur for many years. She's nicknamed the Sun Queen, and for a good reason. As the co-founder of Sungevity, which is one of the largest and most innovative suppliers of solar panels, she's also started the rooftop revolution, which means we should put solar panels on all suitable roofs, not just owner-occupier homes. She also started the Solar Roof Revolution Foundation, and the Jail and Rental Roof Revolution, and I think it's very clear that she stops at nothing. And we have a lot to be grateful for her to be pioneering lots of this work. Understandably, she has been named BNR Entrepreneur of the Year in 2019 and is dedicated to influencing those to live their lives sustainably so that this energy transition accelerates. So with that, I'll pass it over to Rubiam. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll have a little bit of time afterwards. And take it away, Ruby. I'm more excited to learn from you.
Thank you so much. And let me start off with a correction that the Rooftop Revolution, the founder of that is really your very own Danny Kennedy, whose room I'm in at the moment. I was just apologizing for my funny background, but this is the attic. And when Danny stays in Amsterdam, he's always in this room. So very appropriate for this event today. Thank you so much. It's a great honor that I can be with you and all the entrepreneurs in the network. First of all, if I normally, when I give a presentation, this is the outfit I love to wear, although my children now say, Mom, don't do it. Don't wear that dress again. Not her in the dress again. But this is my solar dress. And I love this dress because for me, it symbolizes the world I believe in and I envision for the future, which is a world where everybody lives on sunshine and generates their own power. In my dress, you see a solar panel. What you don't see from the pocket, there's a little electricity line and you can charge your mobile phone. You have to be about 8 hours in full sun before you have like 10 minutes of power. But anyway, it's about the thought. Now, where did this start for solar energy, this love for solar energy start? I was here in, this picture is taken from my hotel room in Mexico City. And this is over 25 years ago. I was working for the World Bank and I just visited my first ever solar project on a bus station in Mexico City. And this was the view after minutes after our power blackout, because often happens in developing countries, as you very well recognize, when the sun shines, everybody turns on their air conditioning and there's a blackout, and then there's this quiet moment, and then everything shuts off, and then there's no electricity. I was in this hotel, my refrigerator stopped, etc. And then suddenly you have this massive sort of brown, horrible smoke in front of you, which is all the diesel generators that are started up as to backup for hotels and businesses, etc. And this picture was just taken at that moment. And I thought, I can't believe this. You know, I just came from my first ever solar project. And I was just mesmerized by the simplicity of the technology. And this is the solution, you know, in a country that needs so much energy to develop. And in a country where there's so much space to put the solar. And where there's so much sun, you know, that's nice and free and clean. So I made it my personal mission, which is now also the mission of my company, Singevity, to not rest before every last inch of roof in the world is covered with solar. Now, why is that so important? For me, and just one slide, I was trained by Al Gore in the Climate Reality Project, where I went with my 13-year-old daughter. She took me there, and he gave us 480 slides and explained us how to explain the truth in 10 minutes, stress the urgency of the climate challenge, the fact that there's a solution at hand, among which solar, and pose the question, what are you going to do about this now that you know all this? And I'm saving you the 480 slides, especially you, because you're all acutely aware of this, but this is always the one slide that really captures that story for me. It's the difference between life and death. Our ecosystems are so incredibly sensitive to the temperature on Earth. So for me, this picture always reminds me of our big why we hate the climate crisis. And the beauty about solar is it doesn't only generate clean power, but it also presses that on button in people's behavior to start being more sustainable. And I'll tell you a little bit further how I try to accelerate that rooftop revolution that Danny started, who's the founder of Singevity. So how did I get people to join my revolution? Well, the first example is the home rooftop revolution. So I started this, met Danny in Australia. We started this company, and basically we said our big, hairy, audacious goal is to power 5 million lives with sunshine, with the idea that that's the starting point for more sustainable lifestyles, and we help our customers become more sustainable beyond just solar. And the idea developed by Sungevity was very simple. When I worked in Australia at BP Solar for 8 years, you saw the raw materials coming into the factory. A lot was happening, and at the end of the factory, the boxes of solar panels came out, and one of those boxes would go to a warehouse next to our factory, and from a warehouse to a distribution center. And from a distribution center, it would go to a dealership. And from a dealership, it would go to the installer. And from the installer, would put that very same solar panel in the back of their van, had to drive 10 times, 10 visits to a home, get the ladder out, measure up, what's the distance, how much fits approximately on this roof with his buddy or his man, came down, sat on the table, made a calculation on the back of the envelope, and then came up with an estimate. Okay, this is the amount of solar that would fit on your roof, and this is approximately the benefit. Google Earth came, I'm talking 15 years ago. And we said, well, you know, would it be much simpler if from that very same factory, that box of solar panels goes straight to that roof where it fits? And that's the birth of the idea of what we call remote solar design. So we remotely design solar systems and do so much more accurately than you can do by hand. And what you see here is a picture on the right of a system designed. Now it's nothing special because everybody does it. We're a social enterprise, and we invited all the companies to come and learn from us and copy us, because if they all do this, we lift the standard and increase the market. But this helped us to be able to say in 3 mouse clicks, you can have solar on your roof, hassle-free. And you could click nicely. We called it an iQuote, an interactive quote, where you can click between the different systems. And you see physically in front of you your own home with that design, changing shapes as you click through. Now that we could do that, we could also proactively look at areas where we saw that there are a lot of customers with solar, and then pre-design systems and send a letter. Now, we had to think about what's the message that goes with that letter. And what we've always learned is a lot of solar companies are really focusing on the rational arguments. If you look online on the website, you see the do's and the don'ts and the technical specification, and there's just a mountain of information. If you want to go solar, you're a starter, you don't know where to start really. So they really all focus on those rational arguments, so that's the head or the hands, like sign here and we'll arrange it for you. But what a lot of players in the market forget is that people take a decision the first minute that they hear you or see you. I mean, it sounds awful, but if I interview somebody, I typically, if I'm honest with myself, know after a minute, intuitively, if this is going to work or not. And after that minute, you're just going to take half an hour, an hour to reconfirm what your first intuition was in positive or negative way. And the same is with solar. So it's really important to touch that emotional button to get that right message to your people. And I'm just talking solar, but it will be of any relevant product that you as an entrepreneur are trying to sell. So it's really, really critical. And the bad news is there's no silver bullet. So every customer group has their own emotional button, and it's a continuous search. So I'll share with you my experience, or our experience, of where that emotional button for solar is. So we experimented, and we said, this is before the Paris Agreement. We said, now that we can pre-design, we send a letter to people and say, hey, you know, first letter, you can save the environment, you know, do your bit for Paris. Nothing happened. Then we sent the next one, and we said, of course, it's about money. So we said, look, did you know you can save 417 euros by putting solar on your roof, 470 euros per year, 15% return on your investment, compare it to 2%, or nowadays minus 1% on the bank. Nothing happened. Only when we sent the third letter, they went nuts. We said, did you know that your neighbors 3 doors down went solar 5 months ago and saved 387 euros and 67 cents. The more precise, the better. And that's the moment that people thought like, oh my God, my neighbor is outsmarting me. And they all went solar. So we hit that emotional button. in the revolution. And this is what happens when you hit the right emotional button. This is a picture of my favorite ambassador. And he went solar in a neighborhood and convinced 160 neighbors to go solar. And this is what it looks like if somebody in an area, when somebody goes solar, you see a picture of a neighborhood with a green circle. That's the first person, the ambassador. And this is a month later, the first neighbors follow, peer pride kicks in. Solar fever spreads, you see another month. And this is the moment that we really live for. This is the moment when the leggers stick out. This is where they, in the neighborhood barbecue, they have to explain why they don't go solar. What's wrong with you? And so that's the moral turning point, the peer pride. So second example of how I managed to get people to join my revolution. And it's a foundation, the school rooftop revolution. I have 2 children, Rosa and Pablo. They went to school. They learned nothing about sustainability. And I think it's very strange that we all teach children about history. That's standard in the curriculum, but not about the future, not about sustainability. So we have about 8,000 roofs in the Netherlands, flat, beautiful roofs of schools. So I set out to I got this foundation, the School Rooftop Revolution, with the aim to power every single school roof with solar and to use the savings to teach children about sustainability. This is how we started. This is the Netherlands, my country. All the red dots are your roof is naked. You know, there's work to be done. Green dots are great, your roof is full. And orange is like in between, you have like apology panels, like we call them in Dutch. It's like 10 panels, whereas 100 fit, that doesn't count. And if you click on one of those buttons, you can look up your own school. And then we made pre-designed these roof scans that you see on the right, and where we see exactly how much you save. So we first thought half of all schools, and then we adjusted our target. We said, why half? Just all the schools. And then we started removing all the barriers for going solar. So we talked to a lot of schools, and of course they said, look, we don't have money. So we established a fund of 100 million euros to go solar, where they can borrow for 1.5%. And then we have no time. Well, we made sure that that we have a whole team of people helping them, hand holding. And this is the great thing. So from bottom up, we had arranged everything, like the money, the people to help, etc. And then we sandwiched them in, because from bottom up, we set up a campaign, and we told children, go to school and put your sunglasses on in the class in the middle of the winter. You come there and the teacher comes in, what's wrong? I said, well, we only take our sunglasses off if you promise to go solar, or at least come up with a really good reason why you can't go solar. That's fine, you can explore it. So top down, bottom up, and ask a simple question. Do we want to learn on dirty and expensive, or clean and cheap? I mean, how can you say no? So that rooftop revolution is totally taking off, the school rooftop revolution. Now, what have I learned from my business? By the way, they also did a rental rooftop revolution, and a prison rooftop revolution, a theater rooftop revolution. So we do revolution after revolution. But what did I learn? Basically, and this is something that you as an entrepreneur will recognize, we call this the solar coaster. So there's never a dull moment. I mean, I can tell you a glorious story about how fantastic Sungevity is, and how we're operating in multiple countries, etc. But the truth is, and Danny can testify to this, I mean, it's ups and downs. You know, there are great moments, and then you fall down again. And we had so many people in the back of my mind. There's always that climate crisis. We must. And in front of me is, you know, what I'm doing is the right thing, you know, and this is really going to contribute to that. And just keep going. So like Dory in that Nemo movie, just keep swimming, really have that attitude and just believe in what you're doing and keep going. So that's my lesson number 1. Then the next one is always try and think like, why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't the next customer not do this? We have the solar adoption curve, and it started with the crazy greens. And then sort of the early adopters and innovators came, and then the next group. So we're always trying to think about the next group of customers. Why are they not going solar? What's the barrier? What do they need? And then think of a solution to that. And also in the market. So one barrier for the Netherlands was that we didn't have enough capacity of installers. At the same time, there were like thousands of refugees that are super capable and really want to work and do nothing. So we worked together with the refugee company and developed a program where we train refugees to install solar. And they work twice as hard, are super happy that they can contribute, learning Dutch, and feel really productive, and it adds to their happiness. And we've solved our own problem because we didn't have enough installation capacity. So that's a program that we've now scaled up. We started with 4, and then we did 12, and then we have enough money to start with the next batch of training 50. It's not easy. It doesn't always go well, but I think it's a very good program. And also the removal of the barrier is the example I just mentioned with the school rooftop revolution. When they say we don't have money, we thought big, okay, 6,000 schools still have to go solar. If they all have on average 50 solar panels, we need 100 million euros. So we set up a fund, and we just went out, raised the money for it, and announced that we had this funding, and it removes the reasons not to go solar. This is a really nice example, I find, about hit the emotional button, lesson number 3. And what you see here is a typical Dutch social housing home. And this is in a neighborhood where 500 people went solar and participated, but there were just a few that didn't participate. And in the Netherlands for social housing, you have to pay like 10 euros extra a month, and then you save 20 on your energy bill. But still people don't trust it. They say, hey, but my shower is leaking, or something totally irrelevant, or we don't trust the technology or whatever. So what we did was we had this big infographic that you see there. I went into that home and look what's happening in this house. And we took note, everything that's happening in this house. There was a kid playing Fortnite. There was a man doing whatever. And so we had like, okay, there's the iron, there's the girl in the house, she was making a sandwich, toasting. And so we were writing that down, and then we translate, what do those 8 solar panels do to this household? How many hours, how many days and hours can you play Fortnite? And how many toasts can you make? So we translated that to translate the technology into something that people understand. We hired this big crane, and the people in the neighborhood were invited. On the right, you see our solar caravan. There's a solar powered, and we served solar powered cappuccinos in the neighborhood. And we had a teacher telling kids about solar, and people could go to safety harness along the infographic. And then they looked out over the neighborhood, and they saw every single roof with solar, but just not theirs. And we got nearly 100% participation there. So lesson number 3. Number 4, this is the school rooftop revolution. Think big and inspire. Don't make the mistake of going for half, go for all of it. And here you'll see where we are, and we see closely that map of the Netherlands coloring green. So I'm not sure how many people, there are 20 or 30 people online. And I wonder if I successfully hit your emotional button. Are you ready to join the revolution? Do you have solar in your roof, or do you intend to go solar? Or do you want to inspire others and tell your parents or your friends to go solar? Because that's the way that we get the revolution going. So spread the solar love and hit me with all your questions.
Amazing. I feel inspired. I feel excited. I know there are probably lots of questions and thoughts percolating in your minds. Feel free to drop them into Zoom chat or in the Q&A. And I'm happy to get us kicked off with a couple of questions as well. It's hard to know where to begin. I'm personally noticing the thread between the conversations that we were just having with Dianto and Nalin, and then the point that you just brought up, Rubium, which is that if we see that it is possible, if we have more awareness and we look to our left and our right and know that things are happening, it makes it more possible. And Deonta was mentioning earlier that some people are aware that, you know, climate change is happening and that there are solutions, but they don't quite know how to get involved. And it's almost just as easy as talking to your friends. I remember earlier, it's hard to know any concept of time, but some people have been saying that, oh gosh, some way to start a revolution is to throw a party. And that means that you're hearing what your friends are doing, you're seeing what's happening in your neighborhood. And I think these are such incredible examples of being able to see what possibilities are out there. And it's magnetic, and it's attractive, and it's fun. And I'm just keeping my eye on the Zoom chat as well. Your energy is amazing, and we'll try to do the same in Indonesia. We worked with refugees from UNHCR Indonesia to join our solar team too. Do you want to share a little bit more about your work with refugees as well?
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to. So what we learned is, I mean, it's not easy, but it is possible and very rewarding. What we found, for example, was that when we contracted, first what we did is we educated the first 4 and then 12. And then from the 12 refugees that we educated to become a solar installer, or retrained, I should say, we found that we had 2 of them that actually were way too smart to go on the roof. They studied engineering in Iran. So we said, come straight to our office, and they just became like project managers. But the others that really went on the roof, we placed them with our installers. We outsource installation, or with other installation companies, because it was not for us, it was for the market, like anybody. But what we found often is that a director of an installation company said, oh, that's a great idea, come, you know, I'll have a couple. But then they show up at 7 a.m. Or 6 a.m. in the rain, in the dark, and get in the van with the Dutch guys, and they haven't asked for these guys that don't quite speak the language as well, and you know, the culture is different, and we really found a clash there, that they didn't have the patience to, you know, to train on the spot. And so there were like, that interaction that wasn't very easy. You have to place them with people that really are welcoming and patient and really want to train people. And so the next thing we did, and we're working on that now, is we said, well, why don't we set up a new social enterprise? We called it Solar Heroes. And that is specifically employing refugees trained to be solar installers. And we have like an installation company in between to give the guarantees to the customer. But we now go out to the market and basically market this. So I went to social housing cooperatives and councils, and I say, look, do you have, and this is a really great moment. I was speaking to a director of a social housing company, and I said, look, I think you should give us a pilot, a big job of 500 homes or something, to the Solar Heroes. It will take longer than normal. We will make a lot more mistakes. And it will be 10% more expensive, because you also need to train the people. And I still think you should be doing it, because those very people that you employ are the people that live in your homes and, you know, now have a job and can pay for their rent. Or in the council, if you employ these people, you don't need to pay for the social security, much cheaper. And this housing director looked at me and said, yes, I think you're right. And, you know, so I think there is really a market for that. And you don't need to keep doing that, but just in the beginning to get the experience and the reputation up. So now we're setting up this social enterprise. And the people, we had money from a council that understood, I'd rather pay it to get people to work than to social security. So they gave us a budget to train people, 50 people. But then the COVID crisis hit. And now my great partner, Fleur Bakker from the refugee company, she set up face mask factory. So now the 50 people are employed in face mask factory. But when that's over and no longer necessary, they will come to the solar market. So we're working on that. Does that answer your question? Or do you have specific questions?
I think that answers my specific question. And I also really appreciate the approach of doing something, evaluating why it didn't exactly work, and continuing to do it. That type of perseverance is so important now and will continue to be. I do see that Cornell SW is asking, if you don't mind, let me know about the solar projects with refugees involving in Indonesia. The LCOE from solar power is still too high in Indonesia, as I'm aware. I wonder if Dianto also has any thoughts on that. And if we're unable, I know we're a little bit short on time, but that also sounds like a great question that we could perhaps continue to have offline. Dianto, any immediate thoughts, or Rubiam, any immediate thoughts about solar in Indonesia?
Yes, thank you, Neha. I think we've seen quite a lot of progress for solar in Indonesia. We've seen that the price have decreased significantly over the last few years, but I think the challenges, some of the challenges remain. It's still not mainstream in a way that you cannot just, if you want one, you cannot just go out and buy some. For some, I think for the significant part of the population, is still quite prohibitively quite expensive. Not because of the price of the technology itself, but more because of the fiscal challenges, tax and things like that are still in place in Indonesia. But I think we will see. I hope we will see those will change in the next few years, if not in the next 12 to 24 months. And with that, I think we will see increased acceleration in adoption of various renewable energy sources in Indonesia.
I worked on a beautiful project in Indonesia on solar, and it was, I even remember the name. I mean, this is really 20 years ago or so. It was Pagerungang Kecil, and it was this little island, and we put in solar for irrigation, so they could actually, it was next to an island where BP had a refinery, and they had all these people working there, and every day they ate chicken. And the chicken, I think they were imported from Jakarta or something. And we said, well, why don't you, farm the chicken here? And so on the island next to it, they set up this chicken farm with the solar power, etc. So it was really nice. So I think to answer the question on the LCOE, I think it's also looking at the pockets in a country where power is, it's hard to access power, it's very expensive. And I think in those areas, it might be, I mean, this is so long ago, I have no idea about the economics now, but there might be pockets that are actually where it is more favorable than alternative fossils, especially if it's diesel power that needs to come from far.
Very cool. That sounds beautiful. We have another question from Sarah. Really interested in your approach to the emotional button and finding and testing that button. For the neighbor has it trigger, how much do you think that is about bringing it back to a really local context, creating trust, and giving people someone to ask other than a company representative?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And that really, summarizes how it works. The reason why Joost, the guy that you saw in the picture that started that little revolution in his neighborhood, he went solar, but he went all the way. We got him off the gas. He had a heat pump, etc. And he became like the role model in the neighborhood. But the conversation, when we once went there with a caravan and said, okay, we'll host like a neighborhood party kind of thing. And I had lined up all these solar consultants, like the experts at Sungevity that talk about solar. And we didn't say a word because Joost was telling the story to his neighbors. And unlike in America, where you give a lot of big financial incentives, in the Netherlands, that's actually suspicious. Joost did that for the love of solar, but also for his pride. He was like the forerunner. He was the example in the neighborhood, and he got all these 160 people go solar, and we rewarded him, and we said, look, you can choose a project that gets a solar installation. So he chose a school and then another. So we powered 3 schools in the neighborhood with solar to thank Joost. And that made him even a bigger hero in the neighborhood. But I often think that's the way it works. If you find that person, if you find that role model, and in social housing, for example, when we do 1,000 systems, you know, at a time sometimes, I gave you the example of the infographic. That was one way, but often first thing we do is we go into that neighborhood and talk to people and research, like, what's the social fabric? What's the language they speak? Do they read their letters? Who are they influenced by? You know, what's the culture here? And sometimes it might be like, you know, it might be local imam, or it might be, you know, whatever, a football trainer, or that's the hero in the area. And we try to get those people involved and interested for them to spread the word, which is much more effective than us with our brochure and trying to sell something. You know, that is an approach that doesn't work so well. So I think it's really important trying to get, and that's also where I think the big revolution starts. And that's also to your earlier comment about, like, what can people do? How do they participate in this climate revolution? Well, it's very easy, you know. Begin at home, begin yourself, and don't be religious about it. You know, there's often this thing about, oh, you know, yeah, but how come I'm vegetarian? How come you're vegetarian? You wear leather shoes, you know, come on, you know, I'm not a hermit, you know, I do what I can. And I also don't lecture other people on their behavior. I just do what I can, and I hope to set the example and inspire others. And that's the great thing. Everybody can do that in their own way. And I think solar is just a great way, because it also you have like your little app on your phone, and you can show off, and it's a nice conversation piece. It's a nice way to enter that revolution, but that shouldn't be the end point. It's a starting point.
Yes, thank you. When it comes to also understanding what gets people moving, what is that emotive piece and influencing culture, I'm curious to know, since we have Nalin from India on the line as well. Nalin, what's your insight into how the relationship with solar is in India? And Rubiam, what is your perspective on what the future of solar in India could be? Either of you, who's...
Robin, do you want to go first?
Oh, you go first. Come on.
All right. Thank you. So Neha, that's a great question. In fact, in India, the lion's share of solar growth is in fact the large plants, the utility scale plants, and the next big sector is the commercial industrial space. Increasingly, we're seeing residential. It still has to pick up pace. And Robin's point about the local neighborhood champions is very apt, because we're seeing certain pockets within cities become more kind of solar heavy than others, and that's because one person has decided to go to go solar, and then the people there's word of mouth, and there's you can see something is working. So in general, people love solar here. It's not so much a part of our general roofs as yet, but I think it's a matter of years, a couple of years when we see that happening.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, I don't know these numbers on the top of my head, but I'm at awe to see like these news about another big solar farm opened in India.
Right.
And it's a few cents per kilowatt hour, well below any fossil alternative. And it just blows my mind, as I have also worked in India on solar. And at the time when it was way more expensive, but still cheaper in some areas than the alternative. But now the economics does the job, which is great. You know, it's you're a fool to choose for why would you? It's the same thing with the school roof revolution. Why choose for expensive and filthy if you can go cheap and clean? And I think that's so beautiful to reach that point. There, it's so logic, but the frustrating thing is like, why doesn't the whole world see this? Come on, guys, do it. And it's great to see that that's really taking off in India, those big parks, and in China. I mean, it's massive what's going on there, and that revolution is going way faster than in Europe. But I think it's also good to see, you know, and I think it will come, the residential revolution. It took about 30 years to get to 1 in 8 homes in the Netherlands to go solar. So it took we have 1 million homes now solar, and it took a very long time. But I must say, I think 2/3 of that happened in the past 2 years or 3 years. You know, the first years when I started Sungevity, it was going so slow, and I had that same frustration. Come on, guys, you know, it's nice and clean. It was not that cheap, but okay-ish. And nobody was listening, you know, and it was really, really slow. But then as we got some traction, then suddenly there's this moment, and then it's just happening. And it's just a great feeling, like we're onto something, guys. So I'm sure that's also ahead for you guys in Indonesia and India and elsewhere in the world. It's very hopeful.
For sure, for sure. No, I mean, I was a solar developer till 5 years ago, and the process of the sale was so different then and now. There was a lot of convincing at that time, persuading. Now it's, you know, it's free market economics. It makes sense.
Yeah,
it's much
exactly.
cheaper than coal. It's much cheaper than anything else.
Yeah, you also don't need to explain the technology anymore. Everybody understands that it works. It's just there for 25, 30 years. It sits there, generates its own clean power.
Yeah,
it's like a free, you know, green utility on your roof or in your field. It's great. I love it.
Incredible. Well, we are going a little bit over time, so I really appreciate everyone still here with us. I think this conversation could go on for hours upon hours. And just, you know, to round it out, Rubium, I'm going to ask you the question that I've been asking everyone, which is, when you dream into 2030 and think about the clean energy ecosystem and the clean energy startup ecosystem, state of the planet, what do you see, and what do you think it'll take to turn that dream into a reality?
Well, of course, my dream is clear. It's right in front of you. It's just, you know, in 2030, I think at least half of you know, the world runs on solar power. And I think it will be much more. Now, at the moment, we're looking at these, well, I don't think they're ugly panels. Some people think they're ugly. I think they're beautiful, but, you know, these conventional solar panels. And I think we'll be looking to solar integrated into, you know, a lot of things that you can touch and even wear, like my dress. I mean, that's a little bit of gimmick. But I think increasingly you see like how solar is integrated in, you know, facades of buildings, in windows, etc. So when you build a home, it's you know, you're building a building that's, the building itself is like a little power factory. So I think we're well on the way towards that future, and I think everybody will not just, you know, generate their own power from the sun, but also use that power to charge their electric bike, or use their power to charge their heat pump, electric heat pump. So I think we will really, and the economics will determine that, I think we really see a world of sunshine that I've been working on for many years. But I think that future is very near. So I'm very excited about it. It's great.
Incredible. I think there's so much opportunity and a really beautiful future ahead of us. And I know it takes many, many people and revolutionaries just like yourself to bring this to all the roofs, all the different audiences. And it feels possible. It feels exciting. It feels possible. And I know we'll get there. Are there any other thoughts on this and accelerating clean energy solutions that any of you want to leave our audience with? Just keep swimming.
Yeah. No, I mean, my thing is just don't underestimate your own role in this, you know, in this big challenge that we have. Everybody can do something. And also, just one final story is like, I spent some time, 5 months, in a forest in the middle of nowhere. And I saw a forest that was just hit by forest fire. And I saw in front of me that forest regenerate, you know, after the fire. And it was so incredibly beautiful. It gave me more drive to fight for our planet and for nature, but also I from a distance reflected on where is it really not quite happening. And in the Netherlands, it's very, I think we haven't involved people enough in the climate policies. So I started a citizens committee for climate change, which I'm trying to launch, where like in France, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Macron, he got 150 citizens from the country in just randomly through a lottery selected and asked them to devise how they could achieve the Paris agreements. And they came up with a plan that's way more ambitious than he had done himself before he was hit with all the yellow jackets because of the tax that he raised. And I had this idea sitting in that forest, and I don't know anything about democratic reform, but I just thought this is important, and I just started it. And now I put in our parliamentary system, we took the first step, and now there's a formal inquiry in the feasibility of launching a citizens committee to basically complement our parliamentary system to devise on ways ahead to accelerate to achieve those Paris agreements. So it's another example of don't try to think like, oh, that's not my area, or I don't know anything about it, or what can I do about it? I think the only way that we're going to actually tackle this crisis is that everybody does their thing and don't think it's impossible, just go and do it, you know? And failing is okay, you know, just go to the next thing, try again, try something else. So those are my leaving thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing all of your lessons, your stories, and everything you've, you know, been able to achieve along the way. I know that it will have a huge ripple effect out. And I'm looking forward to revisiting this conversation in 2030 and realizing that more than half of the roofs in the planet have solar, and perhaps we're more at 90%, and we aren't using fossil fuels at all. And it's economically empowering and inspiring to work on the clean energy revolution. And we see all different shapes, colors, sizes working on this together. So with that, I think we're all feeling inspired and creative, and perhaps would like to go, you know, channel that energy to something that will be really good for the planet and all beings on this earth. Thank you so much, Dianto, Nalin, and Rubium. Thank you all for dialing in. This has been a really wonderful conversation. And if you want to follow all of the other conversations we've had, I dropped some links into our chat. Feel free to check us out, watch the other AES panelists, follow Rubium, find Dianto, find Nalin, and let's keep inspiring each other and working together to bring 100% to the 100%. I hope you all have a great day or afternoon wherever you're dialing in from. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.